Thank you.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, join us in welcoming Jamal Joseph and his brilliant cast of characters for a stage reading of 30 Days in a Waco.
It's movement time, brothers and sisters. It is definitely movement time. In the same way that humanity answered the call of lynching and segregation with abolition movement, with the civil rights movement, with the anti-war movement, with the anti-apartheid movement, it is movement time. This month alone, there are several events around the city dealing with mass incarceration and dealing with issues that range from privatization of prison to raising the age of our young people being incarcerated. And so we must keep talking about what we're talking about tonight, and we must keep talking to one another. And as has happened in successful movements before, we must talk to one another so that the numbers can be apparent when we're talking about economic boycott, when we're talking about attacking the long distance companies who make millions of dollars from the collect calls that have to be made from prison when you are locked up, and they have a monopoly on the phone system, and so that you have families who don't have enough money to put food on the table that are paying long distance bills so that they can talk to their loved ones a couple of times a week, are paying $600 to $1,000 a month in long distance bills. There are so many facets and so many things that when we look about the cost of family, the human cost, the life cost, the spirit cost, that it is movement time. My name is Jamal Joseph. I am a professor of film in the Graduate School of the Arts. I spent a total of 9.5 years in prison. First, when I was 16 years old as a young member of the Black Panther Party and was arrested as a case that was known as the Panther 21 case. Growing up in prison, and I have to say that, and although I was clear that I was a political prisoner and tried to make the other young prisoners that I was in jail with aware that they may not have been part of the Black Panther Party or SDS or the Young Lords, but that they too were political prisoners. There is a thing that happens with when you're incarcerated that deals with the dehumanization of the spirit. And it is something that happens both to the captives and the captors. And you see guards and prisoners who might come to a prison at the same time, and then over the course of a few weeks and a few months, you see the transformation in both, no matter who they thought they were when they came in. And I'm talking about people who came in and may have had a sense of themselves, may have been politically aware or culturally aware. The environment, the captivity begins to dry and zombify and mummify the soul, the human spirit. The excerpt from the play that you're about to see is a play that I wrote when I was in Leavenworth Federal Prison, and I formed a theater company. And it wasn't my idea when I first got to Leavenworth to form a theater company. In fact, I was there doing some federal time, and I was on a big yard, and an older prisoner came up to me, and the prisoners are segregated. Because the prisoners segregate themselves, it becomes part of the culture of control. As it is in this society, as it is among working class people, that working class people don't recognize that they're all kind of working class people or working poor, unemployed poor, but it becomes there would be, you know, the message that we get, the ideology that we get, boy, if it wasn't for the Mexicans, you blacks could have more jobs, and if it wasn't for, you know, for the blacks, you whites could have more jobs, and if it wasn't for this, and then so the working people are fighting over that one loaf of bread, even though they work in the bread factory. You see what I mean? So it works in prison the same way, and it's segregated, and it's territorial, and it's deadly if you move into somebody else's real estate. And I'm sitting in the big yard, and one of the old prisoners who ran things in New Orleans when he was outside. Mr. Cody said, "Young blood, you was in the Panthers out there," and I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "And you did karate and that stuff out there," and that's true. In the Panthers, I'd learned martial arts, and I was a black belt, and I said, "Yes." And he said, "And you did them plays and stuff on the outside." I was like, "How did he know that?" That's getting like real personal. And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, you should do something for Black History Month. I done worked it out with the warden." I went to the prison library. There was only one black play. It was A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. And I came back to Mr. Cody with tears in my eyes, not just because Miss Hansberry's writing is so beautiful, but because, as I told Mr. Cody, there's like a lot of women in here, Mr. Cody. I don't know if I could do the play. He said, "Young blood, don't even worry about it. Look out there on the big yard, pick out 4 or 5 people. We put a dress on them." I didn't think that was the answer, so I wrote a play. And as we were rehearsing, I had 2 guys who didn't really want to act. They were there while I was there because Mr. Cody said so. And we're doing an improv. And one guy looked at the other guy and he says, and my idea was that we would do the improv and I'd stop it and then deconstruct it and teach acting that way, right? And so they were doing the improv and one guy looked at the other guy and I said, "Freeze, guys, that was great." "Whoo, boy, death and struck." That was a nickname. Death had struck them. Death. Boy, that was great. You said you were going to stab him 8 times. And then 10 more times for good measure, and struck. You said you're going to get the weight and bash your skull in. And I believe that. I was in the moment with you in this improv. That's called dialogue when 2 actors are talking. You just did dialogue, guys. Say that with me. And they looked at each other and he was like, I wasn't dialoguing. I'm going to kill him. No, stop. And in the middle of the improv, the 2 leaders of the Mexican mafia came in to rehearsal. And they had about 8 murders since they had been in prison. Because once you're doing life, they give you like 10 more years. So it was like, take my license too, Holmes. And they came in and sat down and everybody said, "La M.A., the Mexican mafia has come into our rehearsal. Who are they here to kill?" Because they never left their section unless they were here to kill somebody. And it was Tito and Rafael, and they're watching the rehearsal, and I'm looking out the corner of my eye, and Tito was getting madder and madder, and after about 10 minutes, he jumps up and he points right at me. He was like, "Yo," I said, "let me talk to you a minute." And I was like, "Oh, damn, it's me." See, I knew doing plays was a bad idea. I knew it violated this convict code. I'm gonna say, "But talk to him man to man, Jamal, just talk to him." And he pulls me to the side and he says, "Yo, Holmes, there's no secrets in Leavenworth, man. And I had to come here to see what you were doing and check it out for myself, I And I'm gonna tell you something I've been watching for about 10 minutes and I want you to pay attention to me." I say, "That guy you're working with, that guy, that fucking guy." I say, "He's not feeling his character." So I said, "Why don't you get involved?" And then he joined. And then a guy from the Aryan Brotherhood had to check it, come see what the blacks and the Latinos were doing, and he joined. And we wound up being the only culturally integrated court in Leavenworth. And since everybody was heavy hitters, nobody bothered us. And a real conversation began to happen through the creative arts. And it became life-changing in there. And then for me, life-changing as someone who thought, Gil Scott-Heron had convinced us that the revolution would not be televised. And I thought, maybe part of it could be on stage, though. So here's a play that was written. It's set in a private prison. It was written 30 years ago. As I pulled it out and dusted it off, I was both amazed and saddened by how little had changed and how many of some of these predictions and the things that we talked about came through. But it is a slice of life trying to show what happens in prison, the humanity, the good and the bad of the men behind the bars, not just the captors, but the captors. I present to you 30 Days and a Wake Up.
If only as a spirit I survive. I am the thought of a man trapped in the steel-encased profanity of an animal's existence. Pero yo soy un hombre. No me importa que me llaman. No me importa que me hacen. And all my dreams live on the outside, no matter how long they keep me inside. Pero yo soy un hombre. No matter what they call me, no matter what they do to me, I am a man.
Attention on the compound, attention on the compound. There's a softball game on the big yard at 5, worship service in the chapel at 6, a movie in the auditorium at 7. All inmates must carry their ID cards at all times. Failure to do so will result in a loss of privileges and disciplinary action.
Where you going?
Corridor 5. A supervisor from electric shop sent us to fix a broken light.
Let me see your ID cards and work order. Salim Edwards. Juan Santiago. Let me see your toolbox.
You just checked your IDs. You want to shake us down too?
Turn around and spread your arms.
Salim.
Unit 7 to control. I'm letting 2 inmates up from the electric shop to repair a light fixture.
Copy, Unit 7.
See me before you go.
I'd like to see that creep all right in a dark alley. Hey, you all right, man?
Yeah.
Hey, don't let those creeps, man, take you out of position. You're too short for that. A few weeks and you're on the bricks, right?
If I finish the program, 30 days.
30-day and a wake-up. My main man. You know, I don't usually mess with short-timers, man. I don't like to be around them when they get punched, stabbed, or tossed into the hole for some dumb shit.
Think I'm gonna do some dumb shit?
Or like getting in the guard's face when he's trying to search you? No, man. You're Mr. Congeniality.
Listen, I can't let them treat me any kind of way. Even if I was getting out in an hour.
See, that's what I'm talking about, short-timers. They act all happy about getting out, but deep down inside, they're scared. So when they get to the end of their bids, they sabotage themselves. But I thought you were smarter than that.
I'm neither glad nor scared. I should rejoice over freedom that's being returned to me. That's mine anyway. Nor am I gonna behave like a slave on a plantation. I'm not doing it.
Yo, Malcolm Chair, Stokely X. Can you step a little higher on that soapbox and unscrew them bolts for me, please?
You know what I'm saying, though? There are more black men in jail today than there were in chains at the height of slavery.
Yeah, and there are more Puerto Ricans shopping in the Pathmark than in the bodegas. More people, more statistics, any way you look at it.
And more private prisons making billions. They built one school and 16 prisons in California last year. They checked reading scores of black and brown boys to determine how many prisons to build.
Oof, man, you read too much. Too many facts on the brain, man, will drive you crazy. You have no control over this stuff. It's like laying in your cell at night, worrying about what your woman is doing out there. It can only drive you crazy, man, so why think about it?
'Cause knowledge is all we got, man.
It will drive you crazy. I've seen it happen before. Hey, I had a cell partner in Sing Sing. He used to eat books.
Nah, there's nothing wrong with reading.
No, he used to literally eat the motherfuckers. He would get a good book, tear out the pages and stuff them in his mouth.
Nah, are you serious?
Serious as cancer, my man. When he started eating the New Testament, I just couldn't take it. I came in the cell and he said, "Yo, Holmes, I just ate Revelation." Forget about it. I had the hack move him out that night before God started punishing him. There's certain things you shouldn't eat, and one of them is the Bible.
Santiago, I think you're messing with me, man.
No, man, it's the truth, Holmes. Santiago only lies when it's absolutely necessary.
On the chow, all inmates report to your units for chow.
Yo, let's go eat. I think they serving the book of Matthew.
Oh, man, don't say that.
No, I'm kidding. I think it's macaroni and cheese.
It's too late, man. You already spoiled my appetite.
Man, that's my song. We used to tear that up in church. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my... That's old school. Learn something.
Microwave food, pot of drinks. This is the worst freaking joint I've been in. I heard I was getting transferred to a private prison. I was thinking gourmet meals and tennis courts.
That's for all the real criminals who steal millions with computers.
Nah, that's for the small timers. The real criminals pay corporate time and keep it rolling.
Yo, at least in state prison, I could have my saxophone in my cell. Yo, they got my freaking saxophone locked up in the music room, man.
Private prison, my ass.
Oye, Wes, I think they're still holding your reservation at the Holiday Inn.
And rest assured, when I get out of here and get my hustle on, I'm gonna be living in the hill.
Sure, man, in the back alley.
I make more money in a week than your Batman and Robin Bugler ass make in a year.
Yeah, well, A, you're a nickel and dime drug dealer, and B, you shoot up and smoke up all your profits, so you're a broke-ass drug dealer, and a trifling dope fiend.
You don't know me. Stay the fuck out my kitchen.
And if I don't?
You will catch a bad decision.
Okay, well,
Chill, bro.
I'm very scared right now.
Chill, relax.
I might catch a heart
Relax.
attack.
No, he's talking.
Just laughing at what you might do to me.
Yo, we talk shit. Just let
Hey,
it
don't
go.
sleep on me.
Oh.
It's all over here doing watching gospel videos.
I used to sing in the choir.
I get that. But you usually listen to the Dead Razor Blades and all that other loud Aryan white boys screaming like they nuts on fire and shit. What's up with that?
That just goes to show how little you know about me.
Whoa, look. This is a little mind-boggling, Evans. I mean, you don't even believe in God.
You don't even like black people.
Wow. Okay, look, just because I'm a little opinionated doesn't mean I ain't got no depth. Yo, this right here, gospel and blues music, that's the roots to rock and roll. Any asshole knows that.
Then I guess you're right.
Anybody know what time it is?
It's time for you to get a watch.
Yeah, maybe. I just thought it was sad for a prisoner to buy a watch in a commissary. It's like forcing you to watch every second of your sentence tick by.
It's 12:30. I gotta get back to the factory.
And we all do. Fiber optic cables are the new license plates.
On your feet, man.
Oh, it must be Christmas!
What's that supposed to mean, Evans?
What he means is you only come down from the front office for news media ops, holidays, and trouble.
Well, it's not Christmas. We had a fatal stabbing in Delta Unit. Altercation between the blacks and the whites. Me and Dr. Stevens are here to make sure that everything is cool. So, is everything cool?
Yo, we all good here, so.
Yeah, we're good, man. Eating some chicken, playing some dominoes. Oh, and we over here, we're just praising the Lord. Hallelujah. And maybe a little later, we'll just shoot up some heroin, eh? And then after that, we'll dress up like we're some famous jazz musicians.
This is a model unit. It's special privilege to be part of the pre-release program.
Yeah, we go all the pills and counseling we want.
The emphasis is on counseling, Mr. Edwards. We want to see you make a successful transition out of here.
And that's exactly what we want. More than anything, Doc, to be well-adjusted, upstanding, productive, law-abiding, gainfully employed, patriotic members of society.
You have to do more than throw terms back at me from our group sessions, Mr. Santiago.
I just want to show you and Director Miller here that treatment approach works and that I have insight.
Sir, I found 2 knives.
Where did you find these?
One was in the common area, and one was in Santiago's cubicle.
Someone set me up. Why should I do some stupid shit and blow my date?
Turn around. Turn around!
Where does the other knife belong to?
The convict code. Don't rat on another convict. Don't steal from another convict. Do your own time. No matter what your religious beliefs, your religious, your political beliefs, your criminal enterprise, or your sexual preference. while you are in prison, you are governed by how you keep or break the code.
Take Santiago to detention. Revoke his release date. Add a charge of possession of a deadly weapon and conspiracy to commit murder. I'm going to ask you gentlemen one more time. Who does this other knife belong to? You got problems, Evans.
You got roaches, Miller. A brand new facility like this, you got roaches? Man, I thought I seen every room in this joint.
There's a lot you don't know.
Yeah, I guess so. Oh, here comes another one. Look at the size of him. Got him. Look at the way the white stuff's coming out.
Evans.
Oh no, you got me. Cold-blooded murder. Oh, please, Mrs. Miller, help me stop so I don't do it again.
You know, I'd get serious if I were you. You could be in here for a long time.
Oh, you mean this room?
No, man, I mean prison.
Oh, that's cool. I like it here, man. Room and board, lots of activities, so much excitement.
It's good to hear. You could be here for another 10 years.
10?
10, man. We got your prints on the knife. That's 5 years. There are several $100s worth of drugs that we found in the lounge. That's 5 more.
Oh, those aren't my drugs.
Really, man? They're not your drugs, and whose drugs are they? Come on, man. Who you protecting? You protecting the black fellas? You protecting your Spanish friend? Evans, how do you think we found out where the knife was?
I thought you might need someone to talk to, Wes. You're in a bit of trouble here.
I ain't do nothing.
The drug swabs we took from the last week tested positive for cocaine.
So?
If they decided to charge you with possession, you could get 5 more years on top of your sentence.
What if they weren't my drugs?
They weren't your drugs this time. But obviously they were your drugs the last time. It's like a car insurance claim. If you get in an accident, everybody's rate goes up, no matter whose fault it is. You're like a bad driver, Wes. A victim of all the bad decisions and habits that make you wind up in accidents that you claim you didn't see coming.
I can't do another 5 years.
The system works on numbers. A small percentage of the cartel leaders and big importers go to prison. A larger percentage of distributors and corrupt officials get arrested. But the lifeblood of the organism, the majority of the prison population, are people like you. Now, you may feel like a victim, and I might even agree with you. But the numbers say someone is doing time for those drugs. If it's not you, then who?
I don't even care about the drugs they found on the unit. It's like a ceremonial rite for you musicians to do a little drugs.
Yo, I can play without being high. I'm just around the scene, this old man.
You are on a lot of medication. Now, either you're very sick or you're walking around my unit really buzzed. Now, I gotta charge you or someone with the drugs. So if you don't talk to me about the knife, about the gang activity going on in my unit, someone's gonna take the fall. Man, I am a big jazz fan. I heard you play and I know you got talent. Picture me like a man, I'm running a venue. I hire you to play, and all of a sudden in the bar someone gets shot and stabbed. You don't get to play, my venue gets bad publicity, and nobody comes to see the music. Alpha Unit is my venue. And whether you like it or not, Alpha Prison is our venue.
How are things for you in the pre-release unit?
Good. I paint, I do my Bible studies, go to the counseling sessions.
I'm worried what will happen when they transfer you from the pre-release unit to the general population.
I'll be fine.
Has your sexual orientation changed?
I'll be fine.
You're a gay man, correct?
I'm celibate. I choose not to let my sexuality be an issue while I'm in prison.
You choosing not to have it be an issue? What about some of those predators in general population?
I keep positive energy around me.
You've already had 4 years added to your sentence for stabbing someone.
It was self-defense. That's all it was. I'm not a violent person.
I understand. But you have to help me so I can help you.
If you're charging Santiago, then you need to get him a lawyer.
Oh, that's right. You got a paralegal certificate that you got along with your college degree since you've been in here.
And a computer training certificate, before you guys started calling all the classes.
Ooh, not me, man. I like the education courses. You give a prisoner something to do, he's got less time for the contraband and the violence, which I got to clean up.
Yeah, I get it. You just enforce the policy. It's the elected officials that cut the programs inside, then build more prisons for people who can't get a job outside.
Yeah, well, that's the only thing Congress can agree on. You're tough on crime, you get agreement from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, it must make you real happy.
Doesn't make me happy, but it makes me real busy. I'm getting promoted to 3 regional director jobs of 3 different institutes. This is the reason why I cannot afford to have gang violence on my flagship prison.
Your slave ship, your problem.
All right, man. What about your problems?
Well, haven't you heard? This slave gets emancipated in 30 days, or at least the physical chains come off.
I thought you were a paralegal. I guess you didn't get the panel memo sent to your cell.
What memo?
The memo that states the judge that imposed your sentence also imposed a $20,000 fine on top of the firearms charge.
Now, I signed a paper saying I would pay the fine in installments.
Well, coincidentally enough, the panel reviewed your file, and they kind of see you as a risk. So, your release date is revoked until you pay the fine in full.
Bullshit.
Yeah, I feel sorry for your family. You got a wife, she works part-time as a teacher. You've got a little daughter with sickle cell anemia. She's been in and out of the hospital. Is that right?
When does punishment become cruelty?
I am not the one who holds the keys to the door, man. It's you.
So all I have to do is tell you about the knife?
And about the drugs.
And about the gang activity?
And you'll put in a good word for me?
And I'll be able to get home and see my family?
As long as I know you're being sincere, I'll help you in any way I can.
How do I know I can trust you?
Because you got my word.
Everything seems to be happening at once.
I know. But you have to make a decision.
Cards are on the table, gentlemen. What's it gonna be?
Go fuck
yourself.
Don't steal from another convict. Don't rat on another convict. And no matter what you see, hear, understand, or feel, whether you're on this side of the bars or not, do your own time.
The cast of 30 Days in the Wake Up. Director Miller is played by Mr. Jack Ferry. Santiago was played by Anton Pagan. Salim was played by Damon P. Taylor. Ronnie was played by Carlton Taylor. Wes was played by Raimundo Kelly. Sparrow was played by Malik Beckford. Evans was played by Wesley Tunison. The Sergeant of the Guard was played by Stephen Hill. And the well-meaning but beat-down Dr. Stevens was played by Tariq Jenkins. Thank you. Very talented cast. We had 2 rehearsals, so let's give them a round of applause. The cast hang out for a second, just to talk about the work. We have like 5-7 minutes for questions, a couple of questions about the piece, how it relates to what we've been talking about and thinking about. Any questions that you may have? You know, a lot of it is intact. The 2 updates, as I was going through it, is that the line fiber optic cables are the new license plates, because they're making fiber optic cables in prison. There is in the Federal Bureau of Prisons has a division called Unicor, which is their factory division. And you start out making something like 50 cents an hour, and then you can work overtime, and then you might get up to $4 or $5 an hour. And it's as you know, kind of was mentioned earlier, that Professor Smalls mentioned earlier. Guys start making enough money to be able to send some money home, so everybody gets caught up in doing the overtime. But they turn a tremendous profit because they're paying slave wages. But these fiber optic cables are being sold to communications and technology companies. They make T-shirts and the underwears for the military, office furniture, bookshelves for GSA, the whole Office of Government, the Government Services Administration. So it is the only bureaucracy or division in the federal government, the Bureau of Prisons, that actually makes a profit. And then what you see is happening in the private prisons is they're not only making the profits from the contracts, and it's profitable. I mean, it costs more to keep someone in prison for a year than it costs to send them to Harvard University, or maybe they should say Columbia University, since we're the most expensive. But it does cost more. But so not only do they get the profits from those contracts, but from the labor and the goods that they produce. So that was the update. And the other update was just that line about that's what both sides of the aisle can agree on. About prisons, about crime and punishment. Interestingly enough, I know we were talking before on the panel, there was a discussion about what is the political discussion around prisons and why does this continue to happen. The trend that began in the 80s, and you have to look at how many people were locked up, say 30 years ago when I was in prison as opposed to now, that number was somewhere around 500,000 or 600,000 people. In the United States was number 3 in the number of people that was incarcerated. That is 2+ million now, and we were number 3 behind the then Soviet Union and South Africa. Undisputed number 1 now, the US, with more than 2 million people locked up. And then when you look at people who are on parole, probation, out on bail, we have close to 9 million people under the control of the criminal justice system. But it was when this wave of conservatism began to hit the country, the liberal politicians began to say, well, I'll get tough on crime. I have to show people that I can get tough on something. And so they began to say, more police, let's lock people up. And even though most of the people in some of these districts were people of color, so that meant that they were saying, I am in fact talking about locking up your sons, and in many cases your daughters, they would get votes around this. And we know what happens with the prisoners and the families and the right to vote. This is not a voting. So they would accumulate these votes. Let me give you a prime example. The bill that abolished federal parole, there's no parole in federal prisons now. It was the 1984 Comprehensive Crime Control Bill. So now federal judges have to sentence you according to a sentencing grid. They can't take into any special circumstances, the family, what you might do. It's a grid. It's done by the numbers. This bill was authored by Senator Ted Kennedy. He was running for re-election. He was under assault. He was like, what can I get, tough on tougher on crime. So the most reactionary bill that we have that kind of changed our thinking about parole, changed our thinking about looking at these cases, was authored by a man who history calls the liberal line of the Senate. And that's the other trend that we see. So when we see, if we think that we have no power or that voting is not important on the local elections, you begin to make these things issues. You begin to make what's happening in the criminal justice system issues. You begin to make stop and frisk an issue. You begin to make it a voting issue. As the people in this city that by not giving up, Jazz Hayden was one of the pioneers of this. Joseph Hayden is a friend of mine who did 30 years in prison, came out and said, I'm going to make this an issue. And in the spirit of the Black Panther Party, and the way that the Panthers used to patrol the streets with shotguns and law books, I heard Bobby Seale once say that if the Panthers were around today, they'd still be doing community patrols. But instead of carrying shotguns and law books, they'd be carrying video cameras and laptop computers. And so Jazz Hayden and a group of people began to come out and start to document stop and frisk. And a groundswell began to grow around this movement. That's why I say it's movement time, people. And then you had people of conscience, you had students join, you had attorneys join, and we are about to see a change that came about as a key election issue because coalitions of people, grassroots folk, working folk, white folk, black folk, brown folk, red folk, yellow folk came together and said this is the issue. We can do the same things with our movement against incarceration, our movement about raising age, our movement about the warehousing of the human spirit. I guess maybe one more?
Hey, my name is Whitney. Really amazing performance, really amazing sort of speakers. Everything tonight has been beautiful. I had a question because, you know, you has sort of framed this right before you guys were about to perform as like maybe a little bit of the revolution could be staged, right? And I'm thinking about sort of the images that people are getting around what's going down on the inside from things like Gangland and Scared Straight and Orange is the New Black and sort of these really popular things about prison, right? And they're really specific narratives because Rick Ross is never going to admit that he was a CEO at a certain point, right? There's like, it's a very one-sided type of sort of outing and sensationalizing. So I guess I kind of wanted to hear from all of you about like your perspectives around how that type of sensationalist portrayal of what's going on the inside and who is locked up and how they're locked up, what that does around folks who are on the inside, folks who are allies, folks who are abolitionists, black men, you know, brown men, all of that. Thank you.
So Malik would like to take that one. And Malik is, I have to say, an amazing actor, as you see. Malik has his degree in theater from Rutgers University, from the Mason Grove School. Rutgers in the house. And Malik studied, as part of his program, studied Shakespeare at the Globe Theatre in London for a year. But Malik grew up in a program called Impact Repertory Theatre, which I am the proud co-founder of. But I think Malik is about to answer that question and about to put something in perspective for us.
Yeah, so I have a friend who is in Orange is the New Black. There you are. And it's interesting to hear her come home and talk about like dealing with portraying those lives. And also, I'll share something with you all. My father's been in prison since I was 7 years old. So federal prison at that. And some of the phone calls that I would have with him, you would hear like, the phone would cut off because, as he said, you know, they own the collect calls and all of that, and you get this little message, beep, this call's from a federal prison. Just throughout your conversation, like every 7 minutes or so. And as a young man growing up with that, beep, this call's from a federal prison, it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a weight that you live with. It's kind of this thing that says, yo, you gotta be serious. And to see all of these things on the television about prison and about how we all sort of want to know about the inside or have this like little, I don't know, like it's sort of taboo, but now it's coming to the front. And I think that's the point you're trying to make, that we are seeing this and we're seeing these shows about it. I don't know, it's hard. And you know, I don't think any amount of bills or any amount of government and all of those policies, I don't think any of that is gonna help. It starts from the individual. So you have to be very aware about that. But at the end of the day, I do think that there are some things we can do politically to help, like the stop and frisk thing that's happening, all of that. But just wanted to share that with you all. The sensationalizing of the prison system with the media is something that we see a lot with Scare Straight and all of that, but it's more than that. It's bigger than that. It's bigger than what we see, because that's just trying to distract us from the real things that are going on.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Before we go on to other questions, I just wanted to add to that. You know, I had some friends on the show as well. I haven't had the opportunity to really watch it. I'll probably binge watch Orange is the New Black. But I will say that I think one thing that could be done is that we need to educate people that entertainment is not exactly entertainment. You know, we watch it and we're like, oh, I'm going to the movies and I'm going to go see Django, you know, but Django's not really entertainment. It's more of a psychological conditioning that's going on with a lot of these movies, a lot of these TV shows. And I'm an actor, so, you know, I study this thing. But a lot of people are going in there and they don't have their guard up because they're looking at it as just entertainment. So we have to educate people that they're being conditioned.
Absolutely. Talk, please.
Perhaps just to... Microphone, please. Thank you. Almost feels sacrilegious using microphone. Perhaps to try and add some perspective on that question. In South Africa, we have one of the highest incarcerated sort of rates in the world as well. Yet there is this curiosity, particular tendency of a number of non-governmental organizations and welfare organizations that seem to be obsessed and infatuated with what goes on in prison. So from a post-colonial perspective, especially now, there's a thin line between how the agony of the black body in incarceration is being represented and the extent to which that itself is becoming commodified. There's a mushrooming of non-governmental organizations, many of which are heavily under-equipped and have absolutely no idea, with no history about working in incarceration, but there persists this this complex that someone who dwells in a South African prison requires less than someone in other spaces. And I think this is a question which is being exacerbated by how the media has been representing blackness in prison in South Africa, and already with the transitional justice system and in terms of the psychology involved around the reworking of identity. The prison system is incredibly vulnerable in as far as that is concerned, because the monitoring, the extent to which there are actually systems in place that will actually begin to ask questions about do-gooders who wish to move into an incarcerated space, and more often than not end up engaging in systems of rehabilitation that have an habitual practice of patronization, and which follow various criteria that are answerable to no one but themselves.
Thank you for that. And what we also see happens is that the portrayal of prisons on television and movies sensationalizes and at the same time desensitizes us. So we have, MSABC, you'll watch it during the day and sometimes catch some progressive stuff. And then there's Lockup Raw and Lockup, where they sensationalize it. And the men that I did time with were like the men portrayed in this play. They were funny, they were human, they were thoughtful, they weren't perfect, they were flawed. So So 30 Days in the Wake Up tried to capture that. I remember when I came home from prison, and then Oz, was a big hit on HBO, and I watched Oz, and I was like, boy, I'm glad I didn't have to do time there. Leavenworth was nothing like Oz. You have real human beings that come from real stakes and real families, and I just point back to Malik, if you want to talk about the face of incarceration, if you want to talk about what's going on, this young man, Malik, is an example. And I remember being in UMan bookstore, and his mom was there, and found out that I'm an educator, but that I work with young people. And I remember your mother, Malik, just looking at me and says, please meet my son. Please work with my son. And it began that relationship. We have many sons and daughters out there that need us. That's the other side of it, is not only the reentry, the mentorship, so that we can break the cycle, because we have a system that is conditioning, not criminalizing our youth. Imagine stop and frisk if you're a young man, a young black or brown man, as some of our black and brown men are, who are coming home from school, off from work and playing basketball, and you look at a cop knowing that you have been stopped and frisked 10 or 20 times. And the attitude of people is, well, maybe if you didn't walk like that or look like that or dress like that. We begin to criminalize our youth. And, we talked about slavery. There was the slave maker, but there was the slave breaker. And so I remember young men in Harlem, where I live, calling themselves 25 to Life. And I was like, what is that, a hip hop group? And they was like, no, Mr. Jamal, we just kind of know that we're going to be like dead or doing life before we're 25. We have to break the cycle on both ends. Thank you. Yes.
Jamal, Joseph, and the brilliant cast of 30 Days to Wake Up. Thank you so very much. To close what's been an amazing program, we have two fabulous poets, professors, and general artists, Pamela Sneed and Kiese Laymon. We'll begin with the lovely, the brilliant Pamela Sneed. Thank you so much, Pamela. Give them 1 second to clear that up, okay? Doing a little bit. Pamela Sneed, thank you so much.
Good evening. An amazing, amazing program. I'm honored to be a part. I don't want to write a nice, neat poem about Sekou Sundiata. I don't want you or I to feel comfortable. I don't want this to feel flowery and poetic. I don't want to talk about what a great poet he was, and he was. I don't want to talk about the deep brown cocoa of his skin. I don't want to describe the baritone of his voice that could entrance you. I don't want to say again he was my teacher in the endless challenges he offered. He was a champion of Sonia Sanchez, of Miri Baraka, and June Jordan was a personal friend. That was the school he came out of, that Black Power Panther thing, changed his name from Robert to Sekou Sundiata. I don't want to eulogize him or talk of the last time we spoke. Today, I want to be that person who says when everything has been resolved and determined, when the final vows exchanged, I object. In the face of silence, I object. I want to be like that slave who refuses to wear chains, does not go gently. I want to invoke the mother of Trayvon Martin, his father burying a son, the community that lost a comrade. I want to conjure Sean Bell's widow, the family of Amadou Diallo. I want to circle this room with caution tape, to draw his body in white chalk, to part the crowds in the audience that has gathered here, to raise my fist in the spirit of Audre Lorde, Assata Shakur, and to shout, it is a crime. Sekou Sundiata is not here today among us. I don't know what we need to do to save our artists, to listen while they are still here. where to draw the line between personal responsibility for health and the nightmarish medical system we are living in. I don't know where to end this, except to say I love, and I miss him. It's been a long time since Audre Lorde was alive. Long time since she donned a dashiki, addressed the crowd, refused to wear prosthesis, spoke in a voice full of the courage cancer gave her, called herself after the Amazons of Dahomey, one-breasted, black, lesbian, mother, warrior, poet, doing her work, coming to ask, are we doing ours? Long time since she said things like your power flows from the same source as your pain, and when in doubt and in fear, silence will not protect you. It is better to speak knowing we were never meant to survive. Long time since she spoke to us as defiantly as Nina Simone singing Mississippi Goddamn, which I've updated to Arizona Goddamn, George Zimmerman Goddamn. It's been a long time since she and Barbara Smith published this bridge called My Back for radical women of color, words that cut to the soul. Long time since students lined up to take her class at Hunter, always full, and her famous saying, make a piece of work as if yours or someone else's life depends upon it. Long time since poetry and protest sprung up from the ground like a resting pink, purple, red bulb, since it felt like a fever that spread. A long time since Nelson and Winnie emerged from hiding, house arrest, fist up in the air, igniting us to act. Long time since 6 a.m. wake-ups when adults filled children's yellow school buses went to Washington, D.C. to protest in favor of women's rights. Long time since assemblies on the front lawn of the Washington Monument, listening to Reverend Jesse Jackson speak. Still, there have been bursts of activism, Tyler Clementi, Amadou Diallo, Sean Bell, Trayvon Martin, but nothing like the 80s act up Tawana Brawley, Eleanor Bumpers, Michael Griffith chased to his death across Queens Boulevard by bat-wielding whites. And so I came to believe that activism, like all of our fallen heroes, required a moment of silence. This is, of course, until I traveled to South Africa and saw up close the cell Mandela sat in for 17 years before transferred to another prison. Seeing the meager bucket, blanket given. This is before learning of thousands like him, men and women who died in isolation, unknown, gave their lives like slaves that thrust themselves from the ships in protest. Until I met people of every age, black, white, Indian, colored, who gave up lives, careers, families to end apartheid. This was until I saw poetry embedded in the floors and the walls of the District 6 Museum, survivors forcibly removed from their homes. History, I learned again that words, theater, activism can really change things. Has power, meaning. There was something about one of the women who spoke after the Zimmerman verdict. He was freed. The state attorney with her hair in a Florida, Texas type upswing with sassy eyes and that smirk that made me see George Jeb, backroom deals, handshakes, disguised voices, walks on the ranch, nothing that will ever go on record. A voice whispering, we're gonna get this country back from the niggers. Something in the way she smirked looked like a high five and a fist bump to George, Jeb, and the rest. Behind her, I could see that NRA fanatic Charlton Heston talking to an empty chair, pretending it was President Obama. I could see handshakes and winks between Sarah Palin and Arnold saying, we're gonna get this country back from the niggers. On another continent a long time ago, Clarence Thomas would have been necklaced. And George Zimmerman is lucky to have never seen jail time because he might have gotten the Jeffrey Dahmer treatment, found in a broom closet. Condoleezza is not an achievement. She's just a girl forever eager to please her white father and would sell anything for that stamped approval. Watching her come out and speak at the Republican National Convention was like watching Philadelphia's first black mayor drop a bomb on a family of screaming black people. Babies set fire, drowning in Katrina while she smiled that American smile, and the children were drowning and they couldn't swim. You have to understand, Trayvon Was never a child walking to and from the grocery store buying Skittles and an iced tea. Hardly a menu for crime, he was already a fugitive with a warrant for his arrest dating back 450 years, ever since he and his descendants made the Middle Passage. Stood on an auction block deemed somebody else's property, George Zimmerman echoing bounty hunters and lynch mobs of eons past. They always get away. But not this one. From this day forward, I promise to never go anywhere talking about inhumanity, human rights violations, to let my eyes gleam with gore, talking about clitoris removal, until we talk about here. What's been destroyed, cut off, maimed. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Sekou Sandiata. This song comes from a gold that does not tarnish or corrode. A human conductor of electricity and heat, a gold deeper than a gold mine, a mind holier than the church, a starvation greater than death. This song sings South Africa in the West. This song comes from the moonwalk yard where the latest dances break and bop, slide, and spin, a secret code between heart and earth. In this yard, opposites mean the opposite. Monday is the day after Friday. Nothing spooky, just a root needed for face and music, a logical flow of anything natural. This song comes down the line from a scene in the mid-Atlantic expressed by the steady, fateful rhythm of the good ship cutting the ocean, pressing an unspeakable hypnotic madness into a dangerous skin destined for a blazing sunset where America would be. This song comes from the democracy of our time, punching out its stupid numbers. This song comes from the colors, red for the left, white for the right, blue for the ups and downs. It comes from knowing too much. This song comes from the nervous vertical world apart, tight, other than the Bantu land on the far right of the radio dial. This song comes from a black and white South Africa music video, a crossover dream to sway the nation, a rock, a pop, a start, a brief moment of integration, a strange song in a strange land. This song comes from around earth, in a flat world to be sung, wherever a flatness happens in the harmony. This song sings South Africa in the West. Thank you.
Pamela Sneed, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Pamela. And guys, hold your seats. Kiese Laymon, essayist, poet, professor. Thank you, Kiese.
I want to thank y'all for coming out tonight, and also want to thank Marsha and Rich for putting this together. It's a wonderful event. Thank you. I'm from Mississippi. I'd like to let everybody know that before I start doing anything. I wasn't lucky enough to know Sekou Sandiata, but I met him once when I was an undergrad. My professor, Calvin Hurton, introduced me to him at Oberlin College. And, hey, Oberlin? Cleveland, yeah. And, man, I expect Oberlin to get a shout out over here. All right, and Calvin said, Sekou, this is Kiese. And, you know, I was shook, and I said, Mr. Sandiata, I want to be a writer. And he said, but who are you? And I was like, oh, Lord. I said, I'm Kiese Laymon from Mississippi. But he's like, no, who are you? And I tried to come back at him. I was like, I'm a writer. Like, who are you? I said, I'm a black writer. No, he's like, who are you, young brother? And I was like, man, I don't know. And he said, you are a citizen poet worthy of citizen poetry. And I looked at Calvin and I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to say to that? Right? What does that mean, right? So I asked him, I said, what does that mean? And he says, you are a citizen poet worthy of citizen poetry, but you are also someone's nephew, someone's aunt, someone's uncle, someone's father, someone's mother. And he really wanted me to understand, and other people who were around him at that time, to understand that we had the responsibility not just to embody and accept like our responsibility to be black, wonderful poets, but to also write to our family. And the last thing he said to me before we left that specific time was, you need to write to your family. You need to write to your family. And so, you know, because he was Sekou Sundiata, I took that with me. And when I wrote my first book of essays, I thought a lot about that encounter. And I started a book of essays called How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others with an essay to my Uncle Jimmy that is completely inspired by my meeting with Sekou Sundiata. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read the essay for y'all tonight. Dear Uncle Jimmy, as a black boy growing up in Mississippi, I learned that there was a rickety bridge between right and wrong. And I learned that I would be disciplined more harshly than white boys for even slightly leaning toward the wrong side. But like you, Uncle Jimmy, I sadly didn't give a fuck. I broke bets I made with myself, got kicked out of high school a number of times, was suspended from college, and had run-ins with police that broke mama and grandma's heart. Unlike you, though, I did all this in close proximity to a lanky, living, breathing warning. Uncle Jimmy, that warning was you. On July 4th, you threw down your crack pipe, scrubbed yourself clean, and bought grandma some meat. This mama's meat, you wrote in loopy black letters on a bloody sack. When your sister, my mama, called me in my office at Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, New York, she had no idea that the 4th of July would be the last day we would see you alive. You joke with your sisters before taking a little tray to get more bottle rockets. Reeking of that familiar mix of sour scalp and Jordan cologne, you probably blinked those red, huge webbed eyes more than usual and actually asked questions of our family. As with many of Mama's stories, you weren't the star, but you were the precocious, literally paroled man on whom our family's emotional stability truly rested. There was a terrible clarity in Mama's voice when she told me the story of July 4th. Mama's voice sounded like this any time you'd followed a crack binge or a run-in with police with something graceful like leading a Sunday school session or using your pension to buy that house over off Highway 35. You driving my sister crazy now, Aunt Sue told me more than 20 years ago, the night I drove my mama into her first nervous breakdown. You headed down the same road as Jimmy. I learned that night that the Uncle Jimmy Road ran adjacent to the refined, curved avenues that nearly all sisters, aunts, mamas, and grandmamas wanted their black boys to travel. Aunt Sue and Mama wanted me to know without a doubt that whatever consumed you would eventually consume me unless I prayed diligently, obeyed the law, remained clean, and got out of Mississippi by any means necessary. But even as I sprinted away from Mississippi to Ohio, then Indiana, and now New York, if I looked down, I could never really distinguish your footprints from my own. That's what I felt before July 7th. On July 7th, 3 days after you toted the bag of meat to Grandma's house, I got a call. Grandma was looking for you. She drove over to your house because you wouldn't answer the phone. Grandma opened the screen and pounded on the door that evening. She yelled your name over and over again, but you didn't answer. You couldn't. On July 12th, 8 days after you brought Grandma her bloody meat, your sisters walked into MAPP Funeral Home and readied your body, the body of Grandma's first child and their only brother, for public viewing. My mama made the funeral director change your shirt. Your sister Sue, the most mesmerizing preacher in Mississippi, eulogized you in Concord Baptist Church that day. We were all baptized there, and at the core of Sue's eulogy were 3 ideas. Number 1, niggers do not exist. Number 2, perfectly sanitized, wholly responsible black people do not exist. Number 3, you, Jimmy Alexander, were equally wicked and wonderful and had far more in common with us than we wanted to admit. Aunt Sue made the church know that you lived a life of bad, not bad meaning good or bad meaning evil, but bad meaning bad at being human. In traditional Old Testament style, she explored justice and recreated in you someone who had prepared himself for death by finally accepting and earning life in the days before your passing, Sue told the church the story of your bringing that meat to Grandma's house. She told us that you had gotten your finances in order. Jimmy wasn't that different from anyone in the church, she told us. No better, no worse. And that's what we have to accept. Jimmy was racing toward death, but he was a part of our family. He was my brother. He was our brother. While Sue stood in the pulpit teaching us about acceptance of our badness, I realized that you were the only child of grandmas who didn't become a teacher. If you had taught for a living, you might not have been any physically or emotionally healthier, since we know that occupations are never shields from reckless sex, drug abuse, cowardice, deceptiveness, and desperation. But Grandma would have found far more peace on the day of your funeral if she knew that her oldest child, a big-eyed black boy born in the late 1940s, taught somebody, somewhere, something before he died. As Grandma's youngest daughter gave the church words to lean on, your mother, our teacher, the thickest, most present human being either of us has ever known, folded up at the end of the pew. Grandma cried herself breathless as your bloodless body lay right over the site of your baptism, Uncle Jimmy. I held Grandma, though. I held her just like she would have wanted you to hold her if I was stretched out in that casket. I needed you, Uncle Jimmy. I needed you the day of your funeral, and when we were both alive, I needed you to be better than you were, but I never loved you enough to tell you. I could have shown you by calling you more or walking you down Old Morton Road when visiting during the summer and at Christmas. We could have wondered about the widened roads and the huge dying trees we both imagined fighting off Godzilla and Starscream. We could have joked and tossed ironic jabs back and forth, as I've heard some nephews and uncles do. Then, if we really cared, we could have harnessed the courage to knock each other's hustle. I could have finally said, Uncle Jimmy, you drowning yourself with that crack and all that hate. Ain't nothing really behind your eyes, man. I love you, and I need you to live. And you could have told me, there's more than one way to drown, nephew. You looking pretty wet yourself. But those words were never said. We talked, but we didn't reckon with each other. Hence, our communication created no meaningful reverberation outside of our speculations about each other. The last thing you said to me Christmas before you died was, no matter how much right you do, white folk in Mississippi do everything they can to make a nigga remember they owned us. There was a silence after that sentence, and I feel that silence with a mechanical head nod and a weak, yeah, I hear that. By that point, though, I believed I knew you. I assume you cope with the weight of a paroled life as a black man in Mississippi by laughing, acting a fool, relying on crack cocaine, alcohol, and manipulation of women who were just as hopeless as you were. And I assumed that you knew that I started coping in many of the same ways. One of the only differences between you and me was that I fell deeply in love with the possibilities of written and spoken words. I used words to create stories, essays, and novels I thought you'd want to read, hear, and see. When I wasn't writing things that you might have wanted to read, hear, and see, I created fictive versions of you that were sadly more interesting and more loving than I ever allowed you to be in real life. You inspired thousands of paragraphs, hundreds of scenes, but I never showed you one single sentence, not one word. I was afraid to know for sure that you thought my work was a hustle, a shiny, indulgent waste of time, but more than anything, I didn't want you to know that I wanted you to be better at being human. I didn't want you to see that I saw in the real you someone I never wanted to be, a shiftless, paroled nigga, worthy of only awe or rabid disgust, a smiling nigga who fought a few good rounds before getting his ass whooped by white supremacy and quaint multiculturalism over and over again. Uncle Jimmy, I knew that you were slowly killing yourself, and predictably, I knew that I would become you. I hated you and me for that. This is a shameful admission, a confession that is even more sour with indulgent guilt when I acknowledge that all of the women in my writing who are partially based off the characters of Grandmama, Mama, Aunt Sue, and Aunt Linda are far less moving, round, and paradoxical than the actual women themselves. And this has less to do with my writing than it does with my love and understanding of them as human beings. Our love and understanding of each other. I love the women in our family enough to ask them questions. They love me enough to answer those questions, often with questions of their own. I wrote to them. They wrote back. Echo. Honestly, I don't know if I've ever asked you any real questions other than why you look so happy in your Vietnam pictures when I was 10, and why you said, quote, there's some fine bitches on earth when you picked me up from grad school when I was 24. My creating interesting American characters based on you to fit the specifications of a paragraph doesn't make me despicable, it makes me an American writer. What makes me despicable is that one of the responsibilities of American writers is to broaden the confines and sensibilities and the generative capacity of American literature by broadening the audience to whom we write, and hoping that broadened audience writes back with brutal imagination, magic, and brilliance. Echo. You can't really explore the terror and wonder of being born, as Baldwin says, captive in a supposed promised land, if one never conceives of the captives as the crucial critics, not simply the consumers or object of one's work. I started writing this book to you before you died. I was in desperate need of an echo, and I convinced myself that the only way to live was to write through what was helping kill myself. I don't only wish you could have read this book, Uncle Jimmy, I wish you could have written back to me, to all of us, the people you left behind. Anyway, only a fool doesn't actively regret. I wish we could have waited in the awkward acceptance that we are neither African nor conventionally American, neither subhuman nor superhuman, neither tragic nor comic, neither defeated nor victorious. I wish we could have affirmed our awareness that our blackness and our southernness are both perpetual burden and benefit, and our masculinity and femininity, something that must be perpetually reckoned with. Mostly, Uncle Jimmy, I wish you could have told me that we are fucked up. And much of the nation has always wanted it that way. But we owe it to our teachers and our children to imagine new routes into beauty, health, compassion, citizenry, and American imagination. We owe it to each other to love and insist on meaningful revision until the day we die. That's what I needed to tell you when you were alive. That's what I needed you to show me. That's what I need help believing. It's easy to write sometimes, Uncle Jimmy. One night, while revising Long Division, I thank God that you weren't my father while feeling like the luckiest nephew in the world because I could call someone as tortured as you my uncle. I wondered who and what I really would have become without you as my warning. I wondered how life would have been different if I had told you I loved you. What would you have done differently with your life if you really believed me? What would we have both felt? If you truthfully wrote to me, how would you start and end your letter? What senses would you write through? What would you discover? Uncle Jimmy, no matter how I contort these words and squeeze the mess out of my memory and our imagination, we will never, ever know. This book is a love letter written a few years too late. I'm sorry I didn't love you. Your nephew, Kiese. Thanks.
Kiese Laymon. Thank you so much. We want to thank you all for coming this evening. Please, on your way out, double check for materials that will keep this conversation going. Before we leave, I want to say thanks to Rudy, our technician, to the folks here at Teachers College, Kofi, who's the technical coordinator. Please keep the conversation moving. Thank you so much, and have a good night.